May 20th, 2011, George Lucas, a few days after he turned 67, found himself at Disney World, sitting alone with his longtime friend and Disney CEO Bob Iger. The two sat in a Disney restaurant. One of the perks of running Disney, you could shut down one of the restaurants and have it all to yourself. The two had been friends since at least 1991, when Bob Iger was head of ABC, and at the time was airing the Young Indiana Jones series. Lucas knew with each passing year, his time at staying on as the head of Lucasfilm were numbered, and Bob Iger knew this also. Iger also knew that Lucas was in love again, and had been since 2009 when he started dating Melanie Hobson, the chairwoman of DreamWorks Animation and president of a Chicago investment firm. Iger and Lucas had a packed day. They were kicking off the renewed, revamped Star Tours. The ride hadn't had a major update since it launched in the 80s, and this was a big and welcome change. At the empty restaurant, Lucas ordered an omelet, and the two friends talked for a few minutes, and when the restaurant staff was out of sight, Iger turned the talk to business, telling Lucas that Disney would love to have a shot at Lucasfilm if he was ready to sell it. Lucas told Iger he wasn't ready to pursue that, but added that he would love to talk about it with Disney when he was ready. Lucas also had been a huge fan of the company, and over the last few years was very impressed with how Disney's other companies were not only being run, but the success they were having. Pixar, a company that Lucas had started, was now owned by Disney and being very successfully run by John Lasseter, and the other company was Marvel. Disney bought it a few years before, and its president, Kevin Feige, was having a huge success. One thing Lucas admired more than the success was that for the most part, Disney was leaving each of the companies alone, letting them run their studio how they felt fit. Lucas may not have been ready to sell Lucasfilm in 2011, but they both knew the seed was planted. Star Tours were done. The planned live-action Star Wars series seemed to not be going anywhere. Dave Filoni was handling things with the Clone Wars. There were no major films in the work. What was keeping Lucas around? Lucasfilm was George Lucas's child. He had birthed it and watched it grow up. It was just as much as part of him as his own children. Lucas didn't want to just hand it over to some big company like Disney and walk away. Lucas knew if he was to sell it, he needed to show Disney, or whoever would buy it, that it was more than just a name. The first thing Lucas did was look for who would run the company once he sold it. He went over and over who was best to take over the job, and out of the blue it occurred to him. A person who was right there beside him the whole time, Kathleen Kennedy, a longtime production partner and one of Hollywood's most successful producers. According to Lucas, there were no other choice. The two met for lunch in New York, and Lucas told her he was pretty much ready to retire, and he would like her to help by turning the company over to her. Kennedy accepted almost on the spot, saying later that she knew this would afford her the ability to use her skills and be part of something bigger. With his replacement now picked, Lucas knew he had to show whoever bought the company that it still had value. It wasn't just the rights to characters of Star Wars, that there was a future. I have to build the company up so it's functional without me, and we need to do something to make it attractive, Lucas would tell the New York Times a few years later, and there was a great way to show that the company had a bright future. He needed another Star Wars movie. For years, Lucas would say that he had no plans to do any more films in the Star Wars saga, that the story ended after Episode 6, and there were no stories to be told for 7, 8, and 9. But he knew the news of returning to Star Wars, returning to the saga itself, not a spin-off film, would put the company on track for a great sale. On the phone with his son Jet, Lucas let him know that he was writing again. Jet loved hearing that, as he knew when his dad was working on a new project, that was when he was at his happiest. Jet asked if he was working on one of those personal films that he often talked about getting back to, and he was shocked when his dad told him he was writing a new Star Wars movie. Lucas needed more than just a story, so he reached out to former Star Wars stars Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, and Harrison Ford. Lucas also reached out to The Empire Strikes Back co-writer Lawrence Kasdan to be a consultant for the story. However, Lucas wanted a younger writer for the story. Over the last few years, Lucas had been watching closely Michael Arndt. Lucas loved that Michael was very independent and wasn't one to go along with the company's bigwigs and would push back. Michael had sold his script to the Little Miss Sunshine to Fox Searchlight and was fired by the company for sticking to his guns, only to be rehired back to get the story back on track. This was the type of person Lucas admired, one that cared more about the craft than what the bosses thought. Michael had also written the highly successful Toy Story 3 for Pixar, so he knew telling Disney that he had Michael on board, along with the original cast, would make Lucasfilm worth a lot more money to Disney. June 2012, Lucas took the next step and announced that Kathleen Kennedy would become co-chair of Lucasfilm. She had been there by his side as he was struggling with his decision to sell Lucasfilm, but Lucas was ready. He picked up the phone and made a call to Bob Iger to let him know it was time to talk. And just a few days later, Lucasfilm was crawling with lawyers and accountants, combing through the Lucasfilm property, seeing what everything was worth, and to make sure 100% that Lucas did own everything that he thought he did. Over 20 lawyers had to check through the rights of 290 prime characters in the Star Wars universe. No stone, rock, or Ewok was left unturned. There was buzz around the office at Lucasfilm, but no one knew for sure what was going on. Over at Disney, Bob Iger confided to his board members that they were very close to making the deal with Lucas. Lucasfilm ordered a hiring freeze near the end of the summer of 2020, causing even more rumors to spread. There was talk behind closed doors that was pretty loud. We heard Disney was buying us, or Sony, or maybe Microsoft, said Bonnie Burton, Lucasfilm's social media manager. Leland Chee, the keeper of the Star Wars Holocron, the database for all things Star Wars, knew something was up when he was asked to come up with a defining number of characters in the database. Another person inside Lucasfilm that knew something big was about to happen was brand communication manager Pablo Hidalgo. On June 29, 2012, Pablo was brought into a meeting with Miles Perkins, a 23-year veteran of Lucasfilm, as head of corporate communications. At the meeting, Pablo was told that he needed to come up with a new messaging to the fans. He wasn't even told why or really what the company message would be, that he would get more details later. But he knew it meant something big, and he was sure it meant episodes 7, 8, and 9 would be announced. All seemed to be going on track. Disney and their team was hard at work and everybody was doing their part. But there was one little thing that wasn't sitting well with Bob Iger. Lucas was refusing to let him see the story treatment for the new trilogy. Lucas assured him that the story was solid and that he had treatments in the works. Lucas would later tell Business Week, "Buying my stories was part of the deal. I worked at this for 40 years and I've been pretty successful." Lucas stuck to his gun. No look at the treatment for the new films until he had an agreement in writing. What did he want for Lucasfilm and the new stories? 40 million shares of Disney stock and $2 billion in cash. Also in the written agreement, only Bob Iger, Disney Studios co-chairman Alan Horn, and Disney Vice President Kevin Mayer were allowed to see the treatment. Later, when asked about the treatment, Bob Iger would tell Business Week, "We thought from a storytelling, they had a lot of potential. No matter what Disney thought of the story treatment, it didn't matter. Disney wanted Star Wars, whether story treatment or not, and their agreement would never state that they had to use the treatments at all." Bob Iger watched all 6 Star Wars movies back to back and took notes, as Kathleen Kennedy was getting Howard Rothman to come out of retirement to manage the coming explosion of license deals. Pablo Hidalgo was at Comic-Con in New York when he got a phone call that a deal was a go, and he quickly sent an email to the editor of Star Wars Insider telling them hold off on whatever the cover story was, that there were big news about to come. October 19th, 2012, Lucas sat down in front of a camera, not behind it. At his side would be new Lucasfilm president Kathleen Kennedy. This was Lucas's way to pass the torch to the new powers at Lucasfilm and get ahead of the story without having to do dozens of interviews. Lucasfilm chief of PR, Linda Howe, was on task as host and would ask questions to both Lucas and Kennedy. The interview was then broken into small parts and posted on the official Star Wars YouTube channel. The interview went smoothly with a lot of praise from Kennedy on Lucas, Lucas on Kennedy, and both having love and respect for Disney, with Lucas saying that when the world comes to an end, we will all be dead, but Disney will be the last thing to go. But it seems Lucas wouldn't be completely out of the picture. As Kennedy were sure fans, he would be an advisor to not just the new films of Star Wars, but to Lucasfilm overall. "My Yoda on my shoulder," Kennedy would say. A little sad, a little happy, and a little excited, Lucas ended his reign as the head of Lucasfilm and felt convinced that it was now in the right hands. Not only with Disney, but with Kennedy as its head and young filmmakers like Dave Filoni and Mike Arnott, and according to George Lucas's son, Jet Lucas, George was already in talks with J.J. Abrams about coming on to direct the new film before Disney even signed a deal. Lucas knew at the time of selling Lucasfilm that it was in good hands. On October 30th, 2012, after the closing of the New York Stock Exchange, the announcement was posted on the official Disney website. They had acquired Lucasfilm Limited, and that a new Star Wars trilogy with the original cast members would soon go into production. After all was signed and done, Disney would pay for Lucasfilm for $4.5 billion, with half of his stock and the other half in cash. That was $2 billion in the bank and $40 million in Disney share certificates, all going to the one shareholder of Lucasfilm, George Lucas. A sweet deal, but it did make some question if Lucas could have gotten more. After all, in its 40 years, it had generated over $40 billion with just the Star Wars name. And this buy also gave Disney, ILM, and Skywalker Sound. But don't feel too bad for Lucas, as this deal will make him the second largest private shareholder of Disney, right behind Steve Jobs' widow. Not everyone was saying this was good news. The day after the announcement, Disney stock fell to $47 a share. A few insiders were confused, saying that Star Wars was a dead brand, that people had moved on to the Marvel films, Avatar, and Harry Potter, and buying Star Wars had came years too late. Others saw this as fresh new air to Star Wars, as many was unhappy with Star Wars prequels and Lucas's constant tinkering with the original trilogy. Fans were excited and nervous. Lucasfilm might have been owned by George Lucas to sell, but a lot of fans felt a personal ownership to Star Wars since they first saw it back in 1977. After a few months, by May 2013, Disney stock was back on the rebound at almost $68 a share, making it worth over $800 million more than when Lucas got his shares. Lucas has often said over the years that one regret that he does have is that he never got to see Star Wars as the fans see it. With the sale of Lucasfilm, it was time to hand Star Wars to the next generation, and Lucas now could sit back and be a fan like us all. Well, I want to thank you for watching. Please subscribe to the channel. If you like this video, thumb up so I know you like my content, and we'll talk again soon.
Junkman.
Thank you, sir, for that unsolicited testimony.